every single standing next to you like this, man. I respect him a lot, so thank you for the introduction. It's always interesting doing these kind of chats because even though for my job I actually talk for a living, I actually can't compute putting words onto paper because I'm the ultimate procrastinist. I really cannot. I've been trying to write this thing down for goodness knows how many weeks, and I only really just got to it today. But luckily, I put pen to pad or finger to pad, as they say these days. And hopefully, I mean, what I've got really is my story, where I've come from, where I am now, and where I want to go. It's always fascinating writing about yourself or thinking about where you've come, because I think we rarely give ourselves the time to give ourselves a pat on the back and go, do you know what, we've done all right, we've done all right. Still a lot of work to be done, but we've done okay. Now, it's a pleasure to be included in an exhibition with many great faces, people I admire, people I really respect. I take two people from the exhibition that was done by BNE a few weeks ago, Steve McQueen and David Ajayi, and they're very interesting to me because Steve is someone I regard as one of my favourite directors of the modern age, next to someone like Shane Meadows, and also David Ajayi, a very great architect. Now they resonate with me for two reasons. One reason, clearly they're black, and seeing a black male role model doing something extraordinarily amazing is very inspiring. On the flip side, they're also incredibly good at what they do. And they tell the story their way, and they're making money by telling the story their way, which I truly respect and something that I aspire to be. Now, we are aware of the lack of black minority. I know it's so weird saying this because we pigeonhole ourselves with those phrases. We are aware of all these things. To the point that, as a black male TV presenter, I turn on the TV in the morning, because I'm freelance, I can do that. And from about, 10 o'clock in the morning until about, when we mostly go to bed, there are very few faces of ethnic minorities. That's accepting any news, children's programming, and music. So what we're saying really is that where it really matters, the great programs that gather millions and millions of viewers to watch, there are no representatives, except for one or two. But then there are hundreds and hundreds of TV channels in this country. And I guess, in many respects, it is up to us as people to put pressure on the big decision makers, but the big decision makers also need to change in order to understand the stories of others. Now I'm going to start off, really, by saying my name is Akinwolere Andrew Akinwolere. I was born in Nigeria. I was there till I was 8 years old, and I moved to Birmingham when I was in 1990. And it's interesting I start with that because only recently, maybe the last 5-6 years, have I really been able to accept and feel proud of that Nigerian name that comes before. When I moved to Birmingham, because my name is Akinwolere, my surname was Andy Akinwolere. And it sounds weird, but it's things like that that make you kind of deny your African heritage. And at that age, I came to a country where kids were able to speak freely to teachers, but I came from a country where if you spoke about a turn, you get a little cheeky smack. And which kind of meant that I lived kind of like a dual identity. At home, I was this very disrespectful young man. Yes, mummy. Yes, daddy. At school, I was like, yo, Andy Akinwolere, bro. That is what I'm doing. And it's weird because I've lived with that for the entirety of my life. Now, my parents are very well-educated people. I would say I'm a Nigerian middle-class boy, but a British working-class man. And it sounds strange because the circumstances in which we lived in the UK were not amazing, considering where we came from. And I think most African parents and African families have this dream of their children and their families and where they're going to go when they go to the Holy Grail, Europe. And the reality isn't what it is. But I respect my parents because they brought up 5 amazing kids who are very responsible and have achieved great things and are still achieving great things. Now, what kind of kid was I? You know what, I was lucky. I was really keen on learning, I enjoyed learning, I absorbed education, and it's what my parents had taught me. But where I struggled was with history, because I saw no identification in history, especially British history, because that was what was taught. So I kind of educated myself, and I think most, I can talk from that perspective, most young men and women that I know used music as their education. So hip-hop, for instance, I was never into mainstream hip-hop, but stuff like, Mos Def, Talib Kweli really resonated with me, because they taught me in many respects about my history and the current state of black people, especially in America. Furthermore, I started getting into the music of like Fela Kuti, who's a Nigerian musician, a pioneer in fact, and he taught me about music of jazz, of funk, of Afrobeat, but was also telling me tales of Nigeria, which my parents grew up in, the corruption of the government, and stuff that's still going on today. Now from there, building that identity, this sort of dual identity, I went to university, I studied media studies, and I loved it. Having to tell my parents I was doing it because I wanted to get into advertising, because it's the only thing they could understand. Why are you doing media studies? What have you got together with media studies? I was like, I love it because I want to be an advertiser. Advertising, that's my boy. And like, in reality, I was enthralled with TV. I realised the potential of TV to change people's lives. Like programs I was watching, like Desmond's, The Real McCoy, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Blind Date, Gladiators. It was a real mixture, and that real mixture for me is what I represent. I'm a Nigerian British man, so actually my British culture and my British heritage is just as valid to me now as my Nigerian culture and heritage. If anything, it's that Nigerian side of me that I've really got to offer that differentiates me from most people I see on TV. Now, from university, I had a great time. I went to work for Canada News in Leeds. Interesting time of my life. Just because it was like local news. I don't know if anyone's ever worked in a local news office, not in London, but up north in Leeds. And it wasn't where I felt comfortable in any way, shape or form. No one understood where I was coming from. I was on the phone to people telling me to come film their cat stuck up a tree, and I'm like, that's not news, bro. That's not happening. And I really realised after about 6 months it was time to move on. But luckily I met a guy called Robert Beckford in Birmingham, and he gave me a little slot on his radio show. It was a black magazine show. And me and Robert would always talk about current black music that I liked, and because it wasn't hip-hop, it was a mixture of everything. So I was going back to the office in Leeds. On one side, answering these dodgy phone calls, the other side, talking to people like Universal Music, EMI, World Music Circuit. And these guys were just sending me records for fun. I was like, I've got a radio show for the BBC. They're like, okay, what do you like? And I started looking into it. I really got into it. Anyway, I moved to London, found a scheme which was trying to get more ethnic minorities into television. The irony of that is nothing really much has changed, and that was 8 years ago. It's really fascinating because I came down for 6 weeks, didn't have anywhere to live, and I was in London for about 2 months before Blue Peter came calling. And I remember the scenario. I was at the BBC bar, quite drunk, and I was just talking to somebody, and turned out she was the producer on Blue Peter, and she was like, look, would you consider auditioning for Blue Peter because Matt Baker's leaving? I was like, you know what, now my thanks. I looked at her face. I was like, nah, I never watched it as a kid, sorry. And she's like, you never watched Blue Peter? I was like, mate, I'm from Birmingham, man. Like, I was watching Blue Peter from high school. I was more a Biker Grove, Grey Chill kind of guy. That's what I liked. That stuff, the real stuff. And weirdly, I remember talking to Mom straight after, and I was like, look, Stevie, Blue Peter says constitution. What's wrong with you? Oh, I never watched it. How much are they paying? I don't know yet, Mom. But you're working for the BBC. Yes, Mom. Go to that interview. Okay. And, for my parents, the prestige of working for the BBC was much greater than what they ever expected. It didn't matter what I was doing. The fact that I had BBC attached to my name, I made it, basically. And, I worked on Blue Peter, and it was the best time of my life. I was there for 5 years, and I was nominated for 2 BAFTAs, one for Presenter of the Year and one for Best Action Programme of the Year. I've never done theatre presented in my life, and then I realised I can And the tough thing with Blue Peter was that it was really hard because I never understood the heritage of the show until I started really working on it. The first year I was on Blue Peter, that was when I got my first nomination for Best Factory Programme of the Year. And basically, it was my trip back to Nigeria. I hadn't been back in 17 years. And I took the programme back to Nigeria, went back to Nigeria for 2 weeks, and I showed them my heritage, my family. And stuff started playing in my head, like, how am I going to attack this, how am I going to do this? Because on one side, Yoruba is my first language. On the other side, I speak. And it's that dual nationality that came to play in this weird scenario when we went to this market in Ikorodu, which is near Lagos. And my they've got this big house, really nice, and that's just about, a few walks away from the house is this brilliant market which I remember going to as a kid. And I'm walking through, taking the BBC through, Niger boy, like, look at this. We've got this guy, we've got this guy. I remember when I was 8 years old, I was doing this, this, and this, and this. Without even knowing it, I just switched to this lady, and I go, excuse me, how much are the tomatoes? And I turned to the camera, I was like, I just asked the lady how much the tomatoes are. And I remember watching it back going, what are you doing? But weirdly, that is the life I led on a day-to-day basis. At home, I was very Nigerian. Outside at home, I was very English. And as I grew older, I realised that actually embracing these two cultures was really pivotal for me. Now, through my time on Blue Peter, I was lucky enough to see 180 different cities around the world. I was lucky enough to meet some of the greatest sportsmen and some of the greatest people and interview them from across the world and from different walks of life. And it really made me realise there's a true potential, because without even putting colour to it in many respects, but I feel I have to, I was this black guy on a show which is the biggest children's show, the longest running children's show in the world. I was the first black man on this show. Diana Jordan was the first black woman on the show. Connie Huck was the first Asian woman on the show in 50 years. And I was like, wow. And I'm in every single middle-class family's home across the UK. And kids at that age don't have any concept of what the people at power are doing or how they perceive people of ethnic minorities and stuff like that. Now, my mission then was to try and alleviate a lot of stereotypes. And I realised, you know what, I've got to use this time to try and do some stuff that I've never done. So I was afraid of heights, and I've got a skydiving licence. I remember talking to my mum, and she was like, "Have you got my job out of the plane? What is wrong with you?" And I was like, look, unless I do this, I can't show, it's only what I can do. The only reason I'm doing this is so I can show people that actually we're all the same, we all have the same fears, we all deal with the same stuff. Consequently, the year before I left, the year I left, that's my final story. The year I left, I was unable to swim, and after 10 weeks, I got the world record for swimming across the deepest part of the ocean in the world. Mixed that with my 2 BAFTAs, my world record, my licenses and stuff, I realised I was alright. Now, I want to be the greatest broadcaster ever, who doesn't? But what do we do and where do we go? Well, we need to embrace our own culture, and also we need to really enjoy ourselves and not limit ourselves with the word black. I mean, there's so many explanations there. Realise that we're able to achieve anything we really want to, and not go, do you know what, I can't do that because only white people do that. And I remember I was talking to someone about going to a museum and gallery. She's like, why do we do that? Only white people do that. It's like, what? I can't learn about art. And that's where we are. Now, I'm going to finish on this last quote. My favourite musician, Robert Glasper, released an album today called Black Radio 2, and it almost came as if, he knew as if I was doing this talk. And it goes like this. It says, thank God we still have musicians and thinkers whose obsession with excellence and whose hunger for greatness remind us that we should all be unsatisfied with mimicking the popular. And I think we should. Because those stereotypes are the things that people look for, but actually when we're coming at it from the likes of yourself, from the likes of David Ajay, from the likes of Steve McQueen, we hit them hard and they go, wow. And that's where I want to be. Thank you.